Christmas Eve, 1998. The Carter family loaded gifts into their station wagon and told neighbors they'd be back before midnight service. But they never arrived. By morning, their house was silent, stockings still hanging, and 4 empty chairs at the dinner table. For 25 years, no one could explain how a family vanished between home and church. Then, last winter, a fisherman's blade struck something frozen beneath Willow Lake, and when divers pulled it up, the rusted license plate told a story no one was ready to hear. The Carters lived on the edge of Pine Hollow, a small town where winters felt longer than anywhere else. Harold, 41, had worked for nearly 2 decades at the local paper mill, his hands calloused, his routine steady. His wife, Marjorie, managed the ledgers at a feed store and was known for keeping every bill balanced to the penny. Their children, 12-year-old Anna and 9-year-old Evan, were inseparable, often spotted racing their bright red sleds down the neighborhood hills until dusk. December 24, 1998, began with the usual Christmas Eve excitement. Neighbors saw the family bustling around the house that morning, Harold shoveling the walkway, Marjorie taping bows to the last wrapped gifts, Anna practicing carols on her flute, while Evan tossed snowballs at the garage door. Nothing suggested this day would be their last together. By 6:30 that evening, Harold carried wrapped presents to the faded green station wagon parked in the driveway. Anna tucked her flute case beneath the back seat, eager to play Silent Night at the midnight service. Marjorie double-checked the stockings above the fireplace and the table she had already set for Christmas dinner, ham thawing, cranberry sauce ready, candles waiting to be lit. At 7 p.m., Mrs. Dugan, their elderly neighbor, saw them pull out of the driveway. She waved from her porch, watching headlights disappear into falling snow. The Carters had told friends they'd meet them at church, but the family never arrived. The service began at 8 Stays. Their pew, always second row on the right, remained empty. Hymnals rested neatly where they had left them the Sunday before. By midnight, parishioners exchanged concerned looks. Perhaps they'd been delayed, perhaps the storm had turned them back. By dawn on Christmas Day, Marjorie's sister came by with a tray of cinnamon rolls. The house was locked, the driveway snowed over, no tire tracks suggesting return. Inside, the stockings still hung, gifts piled beneath the tree. 4 plates sat ready on the table. Everything waited for the Carters. Only the Carters themselves were gone. Within 24 hours, Pine Hollow awoke to a mystery it could not explain. How could a family vanish in the brightest season of the year, leaving behind warmth, gifts, and a home ready for celebration? Snow fell through Christmas morning like soft static, the kind that muffles sound and steals edges from familiar streets. When the Yoshmart Carters didn't answer calls, deputies from the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Office began with the simplest theory. They'd slid off a back road and were waiting out the storm. Sergeant Doyle mapped the obvious route from Maple Lane to St. Bartholomew's, left at the light across Willow Bridge into town, and then traced alternates families used when the main road clogged with holiday traffic. Plow crews were radioed. Any green station wagon abandoned? Negative. Volunteers gathered at the church after morning service, still in parkas over sweaters, still holding foil-wrapped casseroles. They split into teams with borrowed snowmobiles and 4-wheelers. Farmhands rode fence lines. Teenagers walked culverts with broom handles to probe drifts. An old logging crew took the fire road skirting Willow Lake, where drifts could swallow a car whole. The cold bit hard, single digits, light wind, visibility a narrow tunnel of breath. Deputies conducted what they called a house red. The Carters' back door was locked. A faint draft ticked the pine bough on the wreath. Inside, the thermostat held steady at 68. On the counter, a handwritten list. Candles, lighter, service 8 p.m. In the sink, a single mug ringed with cocoa. Harold's work boots sat on the mat by the door, crusted with salt. He'd left in his winter boots instead. Anna's sheet music lay open to Silent Night, penciled crescents floating above the notes. Evan's red mittens were missing from the hook. Nothing hinted at packing, panic, or plans to run. Everything suggested interruption. K-9 units arrived from 2 counties over. The dogs took scent from a scarf in the entryway and pulled strong down the shoveled walk, across the street, and into the road where snowfall had long since lacquered over tracks. At Maple and Cedar, one shepherd tried to veer right toward the old mill road before losing the line to plow berms. Handlers logged it, then restarted. "Storms smearing every hour together," one muttered. "The clock that matters in winter is the one in the sky." By afternoon, Sheriff Leland requested a helicopter with FLAR. The chopper knifed cloud and made passes over ravines and the frozen black sheen of Willow Lake. Warm signatures popped, deer clustered under spruce, a wood stove, a stranded plow. No car, no human glow. At dusk, the helicopter banked low over the lake's western inlet, where springs keep ice thin. The pilot reported, ripples under skim, but fading light and wind shear forced a return. Ground teams marked the spot with a GPS they half-trusted. Inside the incident trailer, Doyle built a whiteboard timeline, 7 p.m. Depart home, witness Dugan. 8 p.m., no show at church. 8:15, 10, Jarris, weather worsens, plows run main arteries. No 911 calls from the Carters' number. Their landline rang off the hook when tested. Their answering machine never picked up. A deputy dialed the last outgoing number from the phone bill. St. Bartholomew's Rectory at 6:12 p.m. Running a tad late, save us spots. Father Bell confirmed the call. The family had been cheerful, no mention of detours. Rumors sprouted in the cold. A clerk swore she'd seen the Carters at the gas station on Route 9 at 7:20. Camera footage later showed a different family in a similar wagon. A trucker reported helping push a green car near the county line. Tire marks proved to be from a pickup with snow tires. In small towns, people mistake the shape of worry for memory. Detectives knocked each down gently, then moved on. On day 2, divers put eyes on Willow Lake's inlet. Ice near the creek mouth was candled, columns and air trapped like bubbles in glass. A long pole sounded for voids. Nothing deep, nothing obvious. The chief diver shook his head. If a car went in far from the inlet, it could be sitting 20 feet under smooth ice. No break, no hole. Snow bridges the scar in hours. He looked at the wind, then at the white horizon. The lake doesn't give in winter. It keeps. By day 3, the search widened past roads. Deputies followed snowmobile trails to hunting cabins. Hot ashes, card games, apologies for not checking radios. Nothing else. Railroad crews walked trestles. A freight conductor reported no impact overnight. The paper mill's security guard checked the lot. Empty. Someone suggested canvassing relatives for conflict. Interviews returned the same refrain: steady job, tight family, nothing to run from. The toughest questions were asked softly. Arguments? Drinking? Money? The answers were ordinary. Yes, sometimes. No more than most. Never late on bills. At dusk, a volunteer named Whitaker, retired, a tinkerer, brought his homemade ice spud to the public access on Willow Lake and tested the ice in a neat grid, logging sound and feel. Solid, hollow, suspicious. He flagged 2 squares near an unplowed turnout. Deputies made a note, intending a formal check in daylight. Overnight, the wind drifted a foot of powder across the flags, and the lake exhaled steam like breath from a sleeping animal. By morning, the grid had vanished under the sameness of white. Whitaker cursed and started again. New Year's Eve came with sirens of a different kind. The town rang in midnight quietly. The Carters' porch light, turned on by relatives, burned like a held note in a song no one wanted to sing. Sheriff Leland stood in the doorway and promised the family they would not stop. He did not add the part he said later to his deputies. The first search ends when the weather decides it ends. In Pine Hollow, people kept casseroles warm, prayers warmer, and car doors locked. The map on Doyle's whiteboard filled with highlighter routes and X's too tidy for the mess they described. The only missing line was the one that mattered, the Carters' path from home to nowhere. The town had searched the woods and the ditches. The lake had been sounded, the ravines walked. The Yaoi station wagon was still an idea and a hope, not an object. The first search taught Pine Hollow two things it would spend 25 winters repeating. Snow is an accomplice, and silence, once it settles, is hard to move. By mid-January, Pine Hollow was carrying two versions of the same story. In one, the Carters had taken a wrong turn in a snowstorm and were lying beneath the ice, their green station wagon sealed in silence. In the other, something darker had intervened, foul play cloaked by the holiday storm, a disappearance too deliberate for chance. Both versions left townsfolk uneasy, and both lacked the one thing investigators needed most: proof. Detective Doyle faced reporters under the courthouse steps, collar turned against the cold. "We have no evidence suggesting the Carters left voluntarily," he said carefully, "but no evidence of a crime either." The words satisfied no one. For families, no evidence was absence itself. For neighbors, it was suspicion turned inward. In small towns, mysteries don't stay in the woods. They move through kitchens and pews, reshaping how people look at one another. The first theory, the lake took them, was the simplest. Winter driving plus an unlit turnoff equaled tragedy. But divers had covered the inlets twice, with no obvious breaks in the ice. If the car had gone in, it had done so where snow and wind sealed every trace. "A vehicle that big doesn't just vanish," one diver muttered, rubbing his frozen hands. But the lake had a reputation. Every decade or so, it took something: a snowmobile, a deer, once even a horse-drawn sleigh, that surfaced only in spring thaw. Locals muttered that Willow Lake was greedy. The second theory, the human one, spread faster. Some whispered about a disgruntled co-worker from the mill. Others pointed to Marjorie's ledgers at the feed store. What if she had uncovered theft? Still, others turned to a more personal suspicion. A deputy overheard one parishioner murmur, "Christmas Eve. Maybe Harold didn't want to come back." The idea slithered through town. A man overwhelmed, a family wiped away not by snow, but by choice. Detectives chased each shadow. They checked Harold's bank accounts. No hidden withdrawals, no secret debts. Marjorie's workbooks balanced. Interviews with friends painted the couple as steady, even dull. Anna and Evan were happy in school, beloved by teachers. Nothing pointed to running away, nothing to domestic fracture. But suspicion lingers when the void is too large to explain. Meanwhile, blind spots taunted investigators. The church's east lot cameras had frozen mid-service, power surge from the storm. Highway surveillance at Willow Bridge was out for maintenance. A single snowplow that might have passed the family's route reported whiteout, no visibility. The plow driver admitted he could have passed a stranded vehicle and never known. "We plow by feel in storms like that," he said, eyes tired. On the town's message boards, theories grew louder. One post claimed to hear 2 sharp whistles near the mill that night. Another described headlights circling the frozen lake at midnight. Deputies checked both. Nothing but kids setting off fireworks. Still, the whispers built a folklore of their own. By February, the official search wound down, resources shifting to other cases. The Carters' house remained frozen in time. Relatives packed away perishables, but left the tree standing, needles brown, ornaments sagging. Snow sagged the roof, as if the house itself bowed under waiting. Sheriff Leland called the case open, active, and unsolved. He didn't say what deputies muttered privately. "We lost them between porch light and pew, and we don't know which direction they went. The blind spots, cameras offline, whiteout roads, The lake's silence were not just gaps in evidence. They were gaps in certainty, places where story and fact diverged. And in those blind spots, Pine Hollow's Christmas mystery grew into legend. By spring thaw, Pine Hollow was a town living in rumor. Each grocery aisle, each church pew, each shift change at the mill carried its own version of the Carters' fate. People spoke in lowered voices, not because they wanted secrecy, but because saying anything louder might make it true. Some swore they'd seen taillights cresting Miller's Hill long after the storm swallowed the highway. Others claimed a hitchhiker had mentioned a green station wagon heading north. The sheriff's office logged every tip. Most unraveled under daylight. But in the absence of fact, whispers became currency. To fight silence, the community turned ritual into resistance. At St. Bartholomew's, Father Bell lit 4 extra candles during Sunday service, one for each Carter. Students tied green ribbons to the flagpole at the high school, watching them fade and fray in the wind. At Willow Lake's public access, volunteers built a cross of cedar branches, planted upright in the snow, and left it to weather. "The lake knows," an old man muttered, tapping his cane against the ice. Meanwhile, investigators kept combing the blind spots. Doyle returned to the service road near the mill, replaying the janitor's account of a whistle in the dark. He paced the length, measuring with his flashlight, but found nothing more sinister than cigarette butts frozen in snow. Deputies checked every shed and cabin within 10 miles, mostly deer blinds and storage for rusting snowmobiles. They found nothing. Each empty space echoed louder than the last. At night, the Carter house glowed like an unbroken vigil. Relatives kept the porch light on, a beacon no one followed. Inside, ornaments still hung from the browned Christmas tree. Anna's flute case sat by the couch, untouched since practice. Evan's mittens remained missing, a detail that nagged Doyle more than it should have. In every disappearance, it is the small absences that ache the longest. Theories splintered further. Some argued Harold had discovered something at the mill, an unsafe practice, an embezzlement, that powerful men wanted buried. Others whispered about strangers seen at the diner days before the holiday, men who paid in cash and asked for directions to Willow Creek. A few clung to a softer hope that the Carters had chosen a new life elsewhere, witnesses to their own vanishing. But even the hopeful avoided their own kitchens when the wind howled just right. As the first year passed, the town layered its pain into ritual. On Christmas Eve, neighbors gathered outside the Carter home, holding candles, snow crunching under boots. They sang carols with voices unsteady, ending always with Silent Night. The refrain carried across Maple Lane like a promise and a plea. When the final note faded, silence reclaimed the street. And in that silence, Pine Hollow did what it had been doing since the family vanished, waiting. Waiting for thaw to give up secrets. Waiting for the lake to loosen its grip. Waiting for the day rumor turned back into fact. By the second winter, Willow Lake had become less a body of water and more a character in the town's unfinished story. Parents warned their children not to skate too far from shore. Fishermen muttered about bad luck if their lines tangled near the northern cove. The lake's reputation for swallowing things whole, snowmobiles, deer, even the occasional tractor, now carried the Carters' names in every telling. In February 2000, divers returned. The sheriff authorized a second sweep, this time with side-scan sonar. The equipment traced long shadows across the lakebed, trees that had drowned decades earlier, rocks shaped like hulks, and one promising anomaly, a rectangle 15 feet long, lying in silt near the old logging channel. Hope surged. Deputies cordoned the area, and divers descended with lines and lights. But when the image resolved, the car was nothing more than a collapsed dock from a resort long gone. The town deflated all at once, like breath held too long. Yet the lake whispered still. In spring, when thaw peeled away the last layer of ice, a family walking their dog near the eastern shore spotted something lodged among reeds. At first they thought it driftwood. Then the boy pointed out chrome glinting under moss. Deputies hauled it in, a rusted bumper with half a license plate bracket attached. Numbers were unreadable, corroded beyond recovery. Doyle stared at it in the evidence room as though it might confess. Could have been any car, he told himself. Could have been theirs. Theories reattached themselves to the lake like barnacles. Maybe the Carter station wagon had plunged into a deeper pocket, sealed under silt. Maybe thaw would one day spit it out, like the bumper. But others resisted. "Too easy," muttered Mrs. Dugan, the neighbor who had waved to them last. "If it was the lake, we'd have found them by now." Investigators broadened their view. Highway patrol records were rechecked for accidents that night. None matched. Pilots flying low freight routes were asked if they'd spotted stranded vehicles. No. A fresh tip line opened. Most calls were cruel hoaxes. Yet one from a trucker passing through Pine Hollow on Christmas Eve 1998 clung. He claimed he saw a green wagon pulled onto the shoulder near mile marker 42, hazard lights blinking. He couldn't be sure of the family, couldn't be sure of the night, but the detail gnawed at Doyle. They searched the stretch. Nothing but gravel and ghosts. Meanwhile, the lake kept its counsel. Children sledded along its frozen banks, unaware of the weight beneath. Teenagers carved initials into its ice, as if daring it to answer. And every December, candles lined its shoreline in memory, flickering like faint stars against the dark water. The bumper sat in an evidence box, tagged, photographed, filed. Some deputies believed it was meaningless. Doyle wasn't so sure. He found himself staring at it late, the metal twisted, the rust creeping like frost. Objects don't lie, he thought. They just wait until someone asks the right question. By the third year, the Carter case had settled into the strange rhythm of an unsolved mystery. No longer a daily headline, but never forgotten. In the sheriff's evidence room, the items told their own mute story. Harold's work gloves left on the porch rail, the half-burned Advent candle from the dining table, the bumper dredged from Willow Lake. Each piece carried the weight of absence. Detective Doyle began reviewing the boxes again, hoping fresh eyes might catch what fatigue had missed. He noted the odd consistencies. Marjorie's purse had been missing from the house, yet her winter coat remained on its peg. Anna's flute case still sat by the couch, but her sheet music was gone. Evan's mittens weren't in the mudroom bin, though his boots were lined up neatly by the door. These contradictions kept Doyle awake at night. People who vanish by accident don't usually pause to rearrange their routines. In 2002, a new piece of evidence surfaced, not from the lake, but from a snowbank outside town. A hunter found a key ring in spring melt, corroded but intact. Among the keys was one stamped with the local feed store's logo. Doyle brought it to Marjorie's old co-workers, and their faces went pale. It matched the set she carried daily. But how had it ended up 6 miles north on a trail she rarely walked? Deputies canvassed the area, combed ditches, even dug shallow pits where melt had pooled. No vehicle, no clothing, just keys and more questions. Forensic testing revealed something stranger. On the key ring's fob was a faint scratch, a set of initials etched with something sharp, A.C. No one could explain them. Anna Carter, a careless carving from years before, or a mark added later by someone else entirely. Theories flared again. Some deputies leaned back toward foul play, imagining the family lured or forced from their home. Others clung to the lake, arguing the keys could have been dropped during a desperate trek in snow. Doyle considered both and trusted neither. "Objects talk," he said to Perez, the evidence clerk, "but they don't explain themselves." Public hope dimmed, but rituals persisted. On Christmas Eve, the town once again gathered at the Carter home. A wreath hung on the door, needles dusted with snow. Inside, furniture remained untouched, frozen in time like a museum. Children born after the disappearance grew up thinking of the house as haunted. Parents hushed them. Not haunted, just waiting. Each year the same question rose. Why had no ransom call come? No note? No confession? Abductions seek leverage. Accidents leave debris. The Carter case held neither. Only echoes, keys in a snowbank, a bumper in the reeds, whispers that dissolved under scrutiny. And yet Doyle could not let it rest. He began keeping his own ledger, a parallel log where he listed every oddity. Mittens missing, purse gone, initials scratched. He circled them in red ink, arrows pointing toward a blank center. The case was less about what was found and more about what was deliberately left behind. Objects linger, people vanish. And somewhere in that imbalance, Doyle believed, lay the truth. In the winter of 2004, 6 years after the Carters disappeared, Pine Hollow thought it had heard every theory possible until a stranger walked into the sheriff's office. He was middle-aged, weather-worn, smelling faintly of kerosene and tobacco. He introduced himself as Carl Brenner, a drifter passing through. And without prompting, he said, "I know what happened to that family." Deputies exchanged wary glances. Confessions often arrived after too many drinks or from men chasing notoriety. But Brenner's tone was steady, almost resigned. He described a night years earlier when he'd been camping near Willow Lake. He claimed he saw a green station wagon stop at the overlook around midnight. There were 4 of them, he said. Voices carried. Then headlights swept the snow. Then nothing, like the earth swallowed them. When asked why he had waited 6 years, Brenner stared at his hands. "Because I thought no one would believe me, and because I don't sleep right anymore." Detective Doyle pressed for details. What were they wearing? Did he see faces? Did he hear words? Brenner faltered. "The girl, she carried something, a case, like for an instrument. I remember because she held it tight, like it was heavier than it should be." The details struck like a hammer. Anna's flute case had never been found, but his account blurred at the edges. He insisted the family had not driven away, yet he never saw the car leave. He suggested the lake claimed them, though he could not describe the moment. Under questioning, contradictions surfaced. He first said it was Christmas Eve, then a night after. He mentioned a storm, though records showed clear skies until later. Skeptics dismissed him as another attention seeker. But Doyle kept circling back to that single detail, the flute case, too precise to invent, too strange to ignore. Could Brenner have overheard it from local gossip, or had he truly been there? News of the confession spread quickly. Some townsfolk wanted to believe, grateful for any narrative after years of silence. Others sneered, saying a drifter's word meant nothing. Candlelight vigils turned tense, neighbors arguing about whether the mystery was finally solved. In the end, prosecutors found no evidence to charge Brenner. He drifted on, leaving behind only a transcript of his confession, filed and stamped in the county archive. Doyle reread it often, tapping the line about the flute case with his pen. "Too much detail," he murmured, "or just enough?" What gnawed at him most wasn't what Brenner claimed to have seen, but what he hadn't. A family doesn't vanish without trace. A car doesn't dissolve into snow. And yet, Brenner's words lingered like frost on glass. Thin, fragile, impossible to ignore. The Carter mystery now carried another echo. A stranger's voice, uncertain but insistent, added to the chorus of things half remembered, half believed. The winter of 2010 was the coldest Pine Hollow had seen in decades. Willow Lake froze so hard the ice groaned at night, cracking like distant gunfire. That February, a ranger inspecting snowmobile tracks near the North Shore spotted something unusual, a rectangle of metal poking through a slab of translucent ice. At first he thought it was debris from an old dock, but as he scraped frost away, faded blue letters emerged, half a license plate. Divers were called in once thaw began. The water was black, silt swirling in clouds with every fin kick. 20 feet down, tangled in branches from a drowned cedar, they found the rest. A twisted frame, glassless windows, rusted panels of what had once been a station wagon. The roof had caved inward, the doors warped from years of freeze and thaw. When a diver cleared mud from the rear bumper, the plate came into view. The numbers matched the Carters' registration. News spread like fire in dry grass. The family that had haunted Pine Hollow's winters for 12 years had finally resurfaced. At least their car had. Deputies set up floodlights on the shore as the vehicle was winched slowly out of the lake, dripping weeds and long strands of moss. Townspeople gathered in heavy coats, silent, breath steaming in the cold. The wagon's tires, though rotted, still bore the manufacturer's imprint. Goodyear. Inside lay fragments of upholstery, a child's plastic whistle, and coins fused together with corrosion. Yet the lake gave back only so much. No bodies were recovered, no bones, no clothing, nothing that could tell the story of the Carters' final hour. The wagon's driver's seat belt was buckled. The ignition held no keys. The glove compartment contained a road map folded neatly, its paper melted at the edges. On the back cover, faint pencil marks ran down the margin, 4 vertical lines crossed by a 5th, like someone had been counting days. Detective Doyle stood over the evidence table, staring at the map. "Either they were in here," he whispered, "or someone left it for us to find." Forensic experts offered theories. Perhaps the wagon had slid off an icy road into the channel, sealing itself in the lake. Perhaps it had been pushed. Perhaps the family had never been inside when it sank. Each possibility carried holes. The buckle, the missing keys, the tally marks, all suggested human hands beyond mere accident. The discovery split the town once again. Some finally grieved, lighting candles and saying the Carters must have drowned that night. Others refused to believe. "If the lake took them," one neighbor said, "then where are they?" Christmas that year saw a different vigil. Instead of standing at the Carter house, townsfolk gathered at the frozen edge of Willow Lake. Lanterns were set on the ice, flickering over the place where the station wagon had been raised. The lanterns drifted until wind snuffed them out, leaving only the darkness of water and the silence of unanswered years. The Carters' car had returned, but the family still had not. By spring of 2010, the Carter station wagon sat beneath a tarp at the county impound lot, its rusting frame exhaling the stink of algae and lakeweed. Detectives built an evidence ledger thick as a phone book, every page a theory, every theory collapsing into another dead end. The accident theory had the simplest supporters. They argued the family left late, the roads were slick, and Harold lost control. The wagon veered into Willow Lake and sank, entombing the mystery. But Doyle's pen carved question marks into that page. The missing keys, the buckled belt, the tally marks. Accidents didn't leave rituals behind. The foul play camp saw a darker story. Perhaps someone waited near the overlook, forced the Carters into the wagon, and sent it into the lake as a cover. That theory gained momentum when whispers of Harold's unpaid debts resurfaced. Old bank records revealed loans stretched thin by Christmas shopping. Yet neighbors swore Harold was a man who faced trouble, not fled it. He wouldn't put his children in harm's way, Marjorie's sister insisted. Still, debt collectors had cold hands. Another theory leaned toward flight, that the Carters staged their disappearance, escaping a life too heavy to bear. The purse missing, the mittens gone, the tally marks on the map, all could suggest planning. But to vanish without passports, without cash, in the dead of winter? Doyle found it implausible. And even if they had tried, why leave the wagon behind like a stone in the lake? The strangest theory, whispered in bars, was the intruder. Some believed a stranger had taken the family from their home, using the wagon to transport them before abandoning it to the lake. This aligned eerily with Brenner's confession. the drifter who swore he saw them at the Overlook, Anna clutching her flute case. But no one could explain how the house, locked and undisturbed, offered no sign of struggle. The ledger swelled with contradictions. Each chapter of speculation canceled the last. Yet one pattern endured. Someone, at some point, had left marks. The initials on the key fob, the tally lines on the map, the growth marks soot-streaked in the overhang cave. Every artifact carried intention, as though the Carters, or whoever ended their story, wanted to be remembered, but not found. Doyle grew gaunt as the years pressed on, spending nights at the evidence board with red string weaving from mitten to purse to map. Perez once asked him why he still chased echoes. He answered, "Because patterns don't make themselves." By the case's 20th year, the ledger was no longer only evidence. It had become folklore, townspeople adding their own notes in whispers, a shadow seen on the ridge, a flute's faint sound across the lake, on Hombonats. Christmas night, footprints appearing, then vanishing in fresh snow. None made it into official files, but all were remembered. Theories were plentiful. Proof was not. And as Doyle closed the ledger one night, he realized the most chilling line was not in any report, but in his own handwriting. If the Carters left a trail, then who was meant to follow it? On Christmas Eve of 2020, Pine Hollow gathered once more. It had been 25 years since the Carter family vanished, a generation of winters marked by unanswered questions. The old Carter house still stood, weather-beaten and sagging, but each December its porch glowed with candles placed by neighbors who refused to forget. That night, the snow fell soft and heavy, muting the town into silence. At the lake's edge, lanterns flickered, their reflections shivering on the frozen surface where the wagon had once been raised. Detective Doyle, now retired, stood among them. His hair was white, his coat buttoned high, but his eyes still scanned the shadows, as though expecting movement. The vigil began with a reading of names: Harold, Marjorie, Anna, David. 4 bells rang into the dark. Families clasped hands, and children born long after the Carters' time asked why they were remembered. Their parents struggled for words. Some said it was because they were neighbors. Others whispered it was because they had never been found. When the candles guttered low, Doyle walked to the shore and set one last flame onto the ice. The candle drifted, light wobbling, until it stalled against a ridge of frozen water. For a moment, the glow revealed something beneath the surface, a pale blur caught in the ice no larger than a coin. He crouched, peering closer. It was a button, red plastic, its thread still clinging, the kind stitched onto a child's winter coat. Doyle's chest tightened. He thought of Anna's mittens, of the purse, of the flute case that had never been found. He tapped the ice with his knuckle, but the blur held still, unreachable, sealed in glass. By morning, snow would bury it again. The crowd began to disperse, voices fading into the trees. Doyle remained, watching the candle flame fight the wind until it sputtered out. Darkness reclaimed the lake, leaving only the whisper of branches in the cold. The Carters' story had no ending, only artifacts, scattered and incomplete, surfacing when the land allowed. A license plate, a map, a button beneath ice. Each discovery promised answers, yet delivered only more silence. Pine Hollow carried that silence like a 5th member of the family. Every Christmas Eve, they lit candles not only for what was lost, but for what remained hidden. The mystery had become part of them, a reminder that some vanishings never close, that some echoes never fade. And as Doyle walked away from the lake, snow crunching underfoot, he knew the truth he had chased all his life. The Carters were gone, but the question of how and why would never leave. It would burn like a candle on the ice until the wind took it too.